Okay, so in class and the last tutorial I recorded, we did this introduction to using a for loop. So we could draw these lines on the screen as opposed to just copy and pasting the line code over and over and over and over again. Truly the silliest thing maybe I've ever done in a tutorial. Maybe. So in this one, what I want to do is expand upon that. And here we're just using a for loop to draw a line in this direction. What I want to do is create a grid in this assignment. And to do that, what we're going to need to do is put a for loop inside of a for loop, a nested for loop as it would be called, to drive these two different positions as we go along. A fundamental concept that we need to get used to will allow us to do many things, especially later on, manipulate images as we kind of use these loops to access the pixels of images and such. One point that I wanted to make is that primary goal for a for loop is to count for us. So let me just comment this out for a second. And I'll try to do this really quick. So here I could just say for let I equals 0. And as long as I is less than 100, I plus plus, which just means just add by 1. Okay. So in here, all I'm doing is using this as a counter, is the way I'm thinking of this. So what if we said x, let x equal a random number, random width, and let's let y equal a random height, and let's let even r, or for radius is what I'm going to use this for. Random, let's do 10 to 40. And I'll do a circle. Circle, circle, there we go. X, Y, and R. Okay, so you can see I didn't use I in any one of these variables. I'm not using it, so why do I have this for loop? Only to count 100 times. I want you to put 100 circles on the screen, right? So already this is, I have this snow going on. Maybe you wanted to cause someone to have a seizure, hopefully not, by having all this flashing on the screen. But what we really wanted to do is draw 100 of these. And so I asked this question in class, well, why is it changing all the time? And through our little discussion, we figured out that it's because this random is choosing random that's different all the time. So in class, I showed random seed. Oops. Seed, so it's the camel case. And I just put 10. I could put any number in here, and I'll show that in a second. But let's just go ahead and refresh that. And what we can see is the random numbers that it's generating are exactly the same. So I did this. I started this tutorial, and it kind of got messed up, so I started all over again. So I used random seed 10, and I did a similar piece of code exactly like this, and I got the exact same cluster. So random is not quite as random as you would think it is. It's this kind of certain sequence of numbers based on whatever number I put into it. So if I don't put random seed, every frame it chooses a different random number to put into the machine of randomness, and I get this random all over the place. But if I put the exact same number in, I get the same thing. So let's turn this, remember this little cluster right here, right? Right? So I get a different distribution, right? I don't see that here. Let's just test our little hypothesis. Look at that. It's the exact same cluster of random. So we'll talk about that later. But if you're doing some tests, as you probably will in this next assignment, with random within your for loops, and it just keeps it's flickering and doing a bunch of stuff. Just remember that the random seed here, you can set that so that you can change the randomness but get a predetermined result that you would see right in here. Well, I shouldn't say predetermined. You would get a randomness and you could choose which one you like. We're like, well, here's number 10, here's randomness at 20. Maybe I like that random distribution a little bit better. Okay, so that's beside the point. But the main thing here is in the for loop, I did this so that I could just get 100 circles. I'm not using that variable to do any counting. But you can set up these for loops, as we did in the one above, so that in addition to doing this however many times based on whatever this math is, right? So 600 divided by 10, so I'm going to get 60 lines on top of here. So that's how many times that's going to be counted, but I'm also going to use that mechanism for counting as a variable within my source. So counting first, but still those variables can be used within my loop to do things for me. All right, so let's get rid of the line. Let's stop this sketch for a second, and let's just start from the beginning. Let's get rid of all that. So what I want to create here is a circle. Now this is just my example because I want to clearly show what a grid is. There's going to be lots of different ways. So just think of this as like the blueprint of a pattern, but you shouldn't necessarily start this way when you do this. But I'm going to say 0 and 0 and 100. Okay, for a circle, or sorry, not circle, my bad, rectangle. Okay, so I get a square, right? It's 100 by 100. It's a square rectangle. If I add a fifth argument, and I'm just going to say 10, I want to put just a little bevel on this tile, just because, I don't know, perfect square didn't look very nice to me. I wanted a little bit of an edge to it, right? So this gives me one here. What if I want to position these? And just like before, this would be a bad approach if I was going to say, hey, 100, and oops, 200, right? So this is a bad idea. We've gotten to that point. So let's go ahead and create a for loop that's going to do some of this for us. So let's say for. In this point, let's just go ahead and draw it in the x. So I'm going to create a variable. Let's call x equals 0. And as long as x is less than the width of our canvas, let's execute the code, and let's keep adding plus equals another 100. And you can see I also made sure to put this open bracket here right as I finish the kind of conditional statement, this thing that fits in the parentheses. So this is my little thing of evaluation, and then it needs to say, well, what is it that I'm going to be doing over and over and over again, right? So we're going to contain it within these brackets. So let's go see. Oh, and then the last thing is, since I want to use that x that's being counted, added up at increments of 100, let's go ahead and make that the variable. Okay, yay, look at that. I've got the first thing. Now, because I want to impress upon you that variables can be your friend, you certainly could just leave this 100 here. But what if I decide I don't like those tiles like that? I want them to be 200. Well, then I have to come in here and I change this number, and I change this number, and I change this number. Maybe I even change this number based on what these are. So instead of that, let's just create a variable. Let's create 2. So let's call this one let tile size is what we'll, and again, this could be whatever you want to call it, equal 100. And let's let bevel, that's what I'll call this one, equal the tile size, if I could type, times 0.1. I'll probably say this multiple times going forward in tutorials, but JavaScript likes to see the 0 anytime you use a decimal point. In fact, if I take that out of there, you can see as a little yellow warning shows up. It's like, I'll do this code, but I'm not very happy about it. So the 0 just helps it understand that this is going to be a decimal point. So 0.1, so this would give me 10 here. So this is going to execute the exact same, but I want to put tile size. Let's just copy that word. Put it there, put it there, put it there, and then we want to put bevel right there. And this is going to look exactly the same. But what if I come back up here and I say, you know what, I want the tile size actually to be 200. All right, so it changes the bevel so that it's proportional to the size of the setup. I could make it this. And of course, I'm using numbers right now that are even. So it's evenly dividing in here, but I don't necessarily have to do that. I could make it 256 if I wanted to. Right, so it doesn't have to fit evenly if you don't want it. But I'm going to leave it at 100 because I did like that side. But it's just, you can see that it's helpful to use a variable in this instance. And we can feed that into any of these as we go along. So that's the first part. Let's go ahead and give this second set of this. In fact, the easy way to do that is let's just copy that first for loop line there. So we've put a new one in here. I need to change this to be y and this one to be y. It doesn't really matter in this instance because the width and the height are exactly the same, but if I had a canvas that was a different size, I want this, I'm using y to be the up and down, so I'll put height there. I want them to be squares, so I can leave tile size where it's at, and I do need to replace this. The last thing, and you can see it's giving me the warning, right? I have these little red blocks over here, and it's underlining one of the close brackets. So I pasted this in here, which gave me another open bracket, but I need to add a closing bracket. As soon as I add that, you can see the warning goes away. I'm going to do Command B to kind of clean up my code. And when it does the auto formatting, and you see 1, 2, 3 open brackets, as it closes off, they usually indent less and less based on how many you've added of these, of the open curly brackets. All right. And uh-oh, something just happened with my browser. Oh, I still had X sitting there. I didn't change that one. Great. Let's see if I can escape out of this. See, when you're doing tutorials, you're not paying attention. It's doing so many of those X's. Let's see if I can get out of there. Let's wait. Okay, sorry, the screen probably jumped there. So I was not paying attention, as I often don't during tutorials, to little finesse pieces here. And I had put let y and y, and then I had left this at x, and it created this little funky loop. It crashed everything. So I just paused the recording while I recreated this code real quick. So you can see that I have a grid now playing up here on the screen. It fills that space. And I have this for loop. I have this nested for loop bit of code. So remember before what we did with the line code is we had a for loop that had its condition, right? And then inside of it we had, line. Oops, let's say line. And we had the code for here. So the for loop said, let's create a variable. As long as it's less than this thing, execute the code, and then iterate and add to it, and then test the condition. And if it's still true, do the line again. So it just kept doing that. So what we get here is a for loop saying, let's start off being x, and let's make sure it's less than the width it is. Okay, we'll drop down in here and execute the code and do all this code. And once you're done doing this code, go back up here and add to this, right? Iterate and test it again. And if it's still true, then execute this code again.
and do all this code, and then iterate, test, and do it again. So it just keeps going until it's done. So let's do the second half of this. So we start at 0, it's less than width. Okay, do this code. The next bit of code that it's supposed to execute that's within these two brackets happens to be another for loop. And it says, well, let's start with y being 0. As long as it's less than width, let's go ahead and execute this code. And then let's check again and make the tile size, again, another 100 units bigger. Is it still less than width? Actually, this should be height, sorry. Same distance, though, 800. Let's do this code again. Let's add to this. Let's iterate, check it. It's still true. Do another rectangle. But basically, it starts and does an X and then does all the Y. And then the next time, it goes through and does another X and does all the Y. And then it does another X and does all the Y. And it works its way all the way across the setup here. I know this to be true because if I put this at 300, right? So I get these 3 iterations of this, but I still get all the height, right? All the height ones work. Okay. The other thing too to keep in mind is that the X, where the position is, so this is at 0, 0. This would be 100, well, 0, 100. In fact, you could even look at it this way. This one would be 0, 0. This square here would be 100, 100. This square right here would be 200, 200, based on the rectangles being drawn from the corner, right? So 300 doesn't actually, we don't actually get to that distance because of the mode that we're using here. There's lots of different ways we could look at this. I'll maybe noodle around in the second tutorial about that. Okay, so let's remember that. This little declare, test, do the code inside of that. And then this one says, okay, we'll create a variable or declare something, test it, and then do all the code inside of that and keep iterating on that until you're done. Of course, once you're done with it once, then you go up here and we get to the next one. So that's why we get this working across the whole entire thing. All right, let's go back to width. Right, and again, the nice thing about this is we could change that. Last thing too, maybe we start dressing this up. Let's go to random. Let's say 255 and 100. It's my favorite little setup. Oops, sorry. I wanted fill to be random. I need a coffee or something. What's going on here? All right. It's like a disco floor from the 70s. So let's go back to our friend random seed and say 10. And again, that random seed number could be anything. So now I get a random distribution of the gray. So this is an interesting starting point for the pattern that we might create. There's so many different things that we could do. I could say rectangle mode center. Oops, those should be all cap. Right, so what I've done is centered the rectangle here, but it doesn't finish all the way, and that's because we have less than, and because the center point needs to get to this edge, it never has a chance to. So if we tell it, though, to go up until it's less than or equal to, we'll complete the whole screen there. Right? So now I've offset that tile. And there's so many different other things that I can put in here. Let's say no fill on this one, and we'll say circle. And again, we'll say X and Y, and tile size. Maybe times 2. Ooh, did I get no fill in here? I thought I did. Oh, little error there. There we go. All right, so I'm putting these on top of each other. Now they're totally embedded, and you can see that they're ending on top of each other. Another way that I could look at this is, let me copy all this loop. And let's put the exact same thing down here. But what I'm going to do on this one is I'll delete the circle. And on this one, I'll delete the square. So now I'm using 2 sets of nested for loops to make this pattern across the screen. And there's, I haven't even, we've been using random maybe to do this fill, but I could put random inside of these, the circle radius. I have this at tile size. I could iterate across that if I wanted to and change what these are. But right now it's an interesting little pattern that it's creating. So you could go on and on and on with this. And of course, this tutorial, I'm going on and on and on about for loops. My apologies. 20 minutes, it's a little longer than I like to do, but this is an important topic. I'll save this and come back to it, maybe add some variations. Hopefully this got you a good primer for understanding how for loops work. See you in another tutorial.